Uh, so if I just type the left paren again, and if I go to the second one, you will see, what does the second one take? An IComparable object, right? See, when we remember, the base class can point to a derived class object. Okay, so take a look over here. When we created the student sort helper, it was implementing IComparable. So that means in the sort method, once they say they expect an object of IComparable, I can pass the object of student sort helper because it implements IComparable. So that will work, right? So if I go back to over here, so what we will do is, before we call the sort, we will call the student sort helper. Okay, so let me call it sh equal to new student sort helper, and then sh dot sort field. Let me put it, for example, first name. Okay, and then now if I call the sort, I can pass the IComparable object. Remember, student sort helper implements IComparable, so I can pass that over here, right? So now the way the sort has been designed, it once it sees an IComparable object, the quick sort internally will keep calling the compare method, because that's what IComparable provides. So which further will end up delegating the work back to the student, right? So anyway, now let's verify that this works. So now I can say, and what was our method? Show something. Show list. Okay, so let's see if it sorts correctly by first name now. So if I click over here, so do you see Bill, Mark, Sally? So it correctly sorted, right? Now suppose somebody says, no, we want to sort by, let's say, last name. So what will you do?
Change the sort field.
Sort field in the last name.
Sort field. Do we have to change anything in the student class or the student sort helper class?
No.
No, right? So this way, even if some third party gave us the student or the student helper, we are perfectly okay. Last name is misspelled. Okay. Okay, so anyway, let's verify it sorts correctly by last name. Baker, Simpson, no, it did not.
Because it was small letter L when you wrote it.
Okay, when I wrote the, let's go to the student class. Okay, last name is lowercase l, right? So suppose I fix this. Okay, just let's get this to work first. Okay, so Baker, Matthew, Simpson, so it's working, right? So anyway, now let's go, so let's again pretend this was created by some third party. You don't have the code for the student class, and now you wanted to sort on ID. So you are trying all possible combinations, lowercase ID, uppercase ID, none will work, okay? And why none will work?
We have written ID.
We have written IDD, right? So obviously your only option will be to call the company and say, how do I sort by ID? You know, we bought your software, but we don't know how to use it, or how to sort it on a particular field, right? So, so when we develop modern software these days, okay, see, in the old days, people used to write, you know, software manuals. You'll consult the manual. How do I do this? These days, everything should be self-discoverable. Okay, so the how do we make it self-discoverable? Let me introduce the idea of enumerations. So let me right-click on the name of the project and say Add New Item. Okay, if you take a look at, there's no option to add an enumeration, but in C#, the file name has nothing to do with what's inside the file. So I'll pick a class, and suppose I call this my enums, short for my enumerations. Okay, and once it generates the file, I'll just delete the class inside it. And now enum is how we create an enumeration. Okay, so suppose the name of the enumeration is sfield. Okay, and over here now we can specify what are the possibilities. Anytime you have a fixed number of possibilities, create an enumeration. It makes the code less error prone and also self-discoverable, right? So what are the possibilities? For example, first name. Everybody has their own style of programming. Whenever I create an enumeration, I will use uppercase letters. It's easier for me to know that this was an enumeration. So suppose I go last name. Okay, and let's pretend IDD. Okay, for whatever reason, test 1 and test 2. Okay, so now internally, an enumeration is like an integer, right? Like a number. So first name, wherever we write, if we write as field.first name, it will replace it by 0. Okay, same thing, last name will become 1. So optionally, if you wanted different numbers, you can always say equal to 4 or equal to 5 or equal to, so you can go to each part and specify whatever number internally it should use, right? The default, of course, is 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Anyway, so once we have defined an enumeration, let me go now to the student sort helper. Okay, and rather than declaring this of type string, let me change it to of type sp. So this will become sp. Okay. So now, once we have it, this sort field over here, of course this is giving an error because in the student class, what was the second parameter written as?
String.
String, right? So anyway, if I go to the student class, what do I need to change this? This will become of type sp, which is our enumeration, right? Okay, now take a look over here. See, previously, you remember I had made this mistake unintentionally. I had left the L to be lowercase and it didn't work, right? So now let me show you two benefits. Number one, you cannot mistype, because if it's a string, there's always a possibility of mistyping uppercase, lowercase, or misspelling it, right? So now, because field name is of what type now? In enumeration. So take a look over here. As soon as I go back, case, space, automatically it will highlight the enumeration. And all I have to do is sfield dot first name. Okay. So same thing over here. I will rely on the IntelliSense sfield dot last name and sfield dot IDD and sfield dot, let's say test 1 and sfield dot test 2, right? Okay, so number one now, as a developer, once you're developing this class, you cannot pick wrong choices. Okay, so that gives us high reliability not only in writing the code, Now let me show you, as far as calling the code is concerned, it becomes self-discoverable, right? So if I go to right-click on Form 1, View Code. Okay, so now if I go sh.sort field equal to, okay, and just put a space, automatically the IntelliSense tells me what it is. It is an enumeration. So all I have to do is just double-click on it. Now suppose you wanted to sort by ID, right? Previously, remember, if it was written IDD, we had no idea. Now take a look over here. If I do a dot, it shows us all the options. So even if it is IDD, you will discover it yourself. Okay? And now let's sort it, see if it's sorted by ID. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 5, 4, 8, so you can see it sorts correctly, right? So the moral of the story is, anytime you have a fixed number of options, you know, for example, we had 5 fields, we can sort on any one of those 5 fields. Create an enumeration, right? Okay, so I will put this on the website for you to try. Okay, now let me, because your current assignment deals with a little bit of the showing multiple forms, let me quickly give you in 5-10 minutes an idea of how do you display multiple forms. Okay, so far we only had one form, right? Okay, so if I double click on the form, okay, you know, just like we can put buttons on the form, we can also put menus. So to put a menu on the form, you go to the toolbox, and one of the options you will see will be called the menu script. So if I double click on a menu script, okay, so this is what the menu script looked like. Okay, now where it says type here, if you just click, you can type, for example, file. Okay, below it, for example, you can say open, right? Below it, you can put exit, for example, right? Okay, in the same way, so creating menus is extremely easy. Okay, so let's say I call it show, and suppose student info, let's pretend, right? So just like once we create a menu, we give it, when we create a button, we give it a name. Very similarly, menus have names. So now you can click on file, for example, and go and give it some meaningful